Welcome to the grotto. Welcome to the grotto. Welcome to the grotto.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Grotto in the Tar Pit. Today's guest is coming all the way from Turkey at the base of the Mountains of Ararat, where he does research and gives tours of the Drupanart structure, which is believed by many to be Noah's Ark. He's also explored Mount Sinai in Arabia and gives tours of it as well. We had him on the show last year where he told us how the great story of how he met Ron Wyatt by calling him on the phone when he was only 12 years old. Since then, he has greatly expanded his tour to include the trails of the patriarchs and their lands, as well as been a guest on many podcasts where he's been doing God's work to show the validity of biblical events through these great archaeological finds. Please welcome Andrew Jones. Hey, Andrew, how
Hey,
you doing, man?
Sergio, how are you?
Good, good. So you just came back from where? Istanbul?
Yeah, we finished a tour. It's actually a private trip with a professor of theology from North Carolina, I believe, or South Carolina, one of those states. And he was out here doing a 5-day tour that we offer, but just him. So we did a private thing, and we actually had a great time exploring and meeting the locals. So his trip ended Saturday, but I decided to go to Istanbul with him. And so that changed my schedule a bit. But yeah, I just got back
Okay.
today, back in here. We're at the base of Mount Ararat here in eastern Turkey. So,
Okay. What would you guys do down there in Istanbul?
well, for me, I was drone shopping. This is a new DJI drone. He left um, Sunday morning, and so the last couple days I was just looking around shopping. Eastern Turkey's more remote, and so it's usually a cheap flight. It's a 2-hour flight to get to Istanbul, the largest city in Turkey. So I was looking up upgrading equipment, but yeah.
Okay, so you are there at the base of Mount Ararat, like I mentioned, and you give your tours of Noah's Ark as well as you do your research. Can you
Yep.
tell us what new findings you've got? What new tests you've done on the structure?
Well, some new findings. This is it's been kind of mentioned here and there on my YouTube channel, but about a year ago, October actually of last year, with one of our tour groups, we discovered pottery near the Ark site, very close. So, a lot of critics will tell you that that boat formation is just geology. It's just an earthen boat shape or almond shape. They say they don't even want to use the word boat now. Um, but when we found the pottery, obviously that's cultural remains, and that's things that you can date, and that's usually what archaeologists love. And so, in the ancient historians who wrote about Noah's Ark, like Josephus, and he quotes a lot of different other historians, but Josephus mentions that tourist pilgrims would come out to Noah's Ark in the past. And so for us to find pottery right beside the boat-shaped formation is exciting. We
What
don't know the
languages is
date.
what languages are found on these potteries and from what
There's
time period?
yeah, so there's no text on it. Some of them have incised marks, mainly it's just different colors, and a couple of them are actually stone tools. We have chopping stone. I mean, I was just at a museum in Istanbul, the Istanbul University Archaeological Museum, and so their museum at the university covers things that they've worked on in Turkey for that university, and they have stone tools there. And a couple of the displays have exact same type of triangle shaped stone tools that we found, whether they're like a pestle for pounding down something or chopping. So it does show that this area was inhabited all the way back through antiquity, right after the flood. Now we haven't dated the pottery, so it could be 50 years old, all the way to we're hoping it's obviously ancient, before the Urartu kingdom was out here. So we'll see. We talked to as part of the trip last week. We went to Ottawa University. That's the local government university for this province, and we met with a couple of the professors and mentioned this discovery. And so Ottawa University does not have an archaeological department. They hope to have one soon, which would be very exciting. but they teamed up with Istanbul Technical University, which is E2, also a couple other universities. And so the professor we talked to, he suggested that he's really excited too, but he wants us to send him photos, and then he'll pass it on to his colleagues in the other university, and they will check it out. And then if they're interested, we will ship them some samples. So right now, we just, what we saw at the site 1 year ago, and then what we've every trip we go down there, like more pottery is coming out of the ground or more fragments, these stone tools. So we just put them in bags and keep them at a secure location. And that way, when the scientists are ready, they can look at those, and then we'll show them the site where we found it at, and they can, if they want to, do a professional excavation. We're hoping that it's something that can be tied into visitors or people living in the area beside Noah's Ark. So, any rate, we
Well, I guess things
that was
are a
one
little
of
different there in things are a little different out there in Turkey, because right here, if any pottery is found, or at least in the United States, if there's a construction site or something like that,
oh yeah,
and pottery is found, everything gets shut down. Whatever was
yeah.
being built there is no longer going to be built there, and they want to
I have
find
a
out what that pottery was about.
Of course, yeah, and the laws are a lot stricter or different from the U.S. I have a friend who's an archaeologist, and one of his jobs in the past, when he just had his bachelor's degree, was to go out and check whatever they're doing on either Native American land or at the construction sites for companies, by law, like California or the West Coast he was working
Yeah.
in. And so they would check to make sure that it wasn't something very important. Israel has the same laws. It makes sense that if you're going to dig or put a foundation in for a big construction site, you don't destroy some very important historical artifacts. Now, this pottery that's coming out of the ground, we didn't dig; it's just like popping up due to weathering. But it's in the area of some of the locals farming. So when this is their fields for wheat, especially. So when they're tilling the ground, this stuff will pop out. And so, it's exciting to see that. Now, uh, a background on some of this, Agri University and E2 had teamed up in 2022, I believe was the date, and they did a walking survey on the surface. And I don't know exactly where they walked, but it was in the same area, in the mountainside there where the Drupner sited. And they mentioned in their press release in 2023 at the Noah's Ark Symposium that they had found pottery dating back all the way to the start of the pottery age for this area of Turkey. So some of the oldest pottery, they said, was discovered on this mountainside. So obviously, as a biblical, you can say researcher who believes the Book of Genesis really happened, some of the dates they give for the different ages, I don't, I'd have to squeeze it down to something that's under 10,000, and definitely under 6,000 years old. If you go with the chronology in Genesis, and the Earth is about 6,000 years old, then these dates that archaeologists throw out or geologists, for me, they're wrong. But you can still use that information about the types of pottery and put it into a time period. And I believe, obviously it would be post flood, right after the flood. Whoever lived around this area, Noah's descendants or Noah himself, they probably produced this pottery because it's right there by the Ark site. So we'll see what it says. Their report was a kind of an initial report on what they found back in 2022. For us, since we found a whole cache, a whole deposit of different pottery pieces, we need to have the experts look at it. So right now, I'm just saying we found pottery. I don't, again, I don't know if it's 50 years old or 2,000 or 3,000 years old. So that's one of the new things. We're still working on this year's. We have about 2 months left before winter hits. And so we're still working on getting out our fundraising campaign to pay for some of the surveys we need to do for our next step in the process. So Dr. Salih Burak Tutan has identified the Turkish companies. We're using locals because it's cheaper than bringing in foreigners. But so he's identified the companies that can come do the work. We got the price quotes, and now I'm just working on the web page and getting everything ready to do the email blast and all that, and to make the videos. So we have some videos edited that hopefully tomorrow or sometime this week we'll put out what our latest goals are for the research side. And so, yeah, that's
Now,
kind of the latest going on here.
Basically, from the research that you've done and the stuff that you guys have compiled so far, were you were you to say that the technology that was around pre-flood was a lot more advanced than we would think? Because I know one of the things that was mentioned is that, or in Ron Wyatt's studies, is that there was aluminum in some of the nails, and that aluminum wasn't even synthesized until the 1800s. Can you elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, especially I wouldn't, I think others have looked at maybe aluminum being found there in the nails, but what I know Ron had looked at was this fossilized rivet that his tour group found in 1991, I believe, at the top pointed end of the ship. And so this one, they did analyze and discovered different types of metals, suggesting the alloy composition. And so, uh, yeah, the Bible is clear that they used alloys before the flood. It mentions bronze, which is a mix of tin and copper. And so, Book of Genesis says one of the Cain's descendants on the wicked side, they were making alloys. So you can expect on the other side, the righteous, and that lineage, they had the same type of technology. The Bible, doesn't give us specific.
So in
Uh,
modern times, when was the Bronze Age? Around what time? Do you know when the Bronze Age was?
Well, yeah, so it would be
And,
after the flood, obviously. So these
yeah.
ages that the scientists give us for, you go to an archaeological site and you see, oh, they're using mainly bronze tools. The time of Abraham is considered, I think, Middle Bronze Age, and you have the Late Bronze Age being the Exodus. But here the Bible's saying before the flood, before you see all these archaeological sites using bronze, they were using bronze. For our studies, we mainly have used geophysical survey techniques like GPR. We did use lidar and thermal cameras too. These are non-destructive ways to study the site, photogrammetry to make 3D models and see how the site is changing. And so these are studies that we've done, plus the soil tests that were done just last year, which was in the news all this year. We got a lot of great press. God opened the doors for these reporters to contact us. We didn't even put out a press release to these guys, and they contact us asking for the latest, kind of like what you're doing. And I don't know who got the ball rolling, whether it was a British reporter or Australian, but one of those reporters emailed us, and I said, "Hey, well, here's the latest news. We did soil analysis, and it's showing that the soil inside the site is distinct and different from right outside the boat formation." And that's the extent that we've done.
How is it distinct?
Um,
Does it have different metals? Is it more
Yeah,
carbon
you know what?
or?
I just had let me pull up the report because a couple times I actually misquoted the report and got. I'm not a soil scientist, so I got some of the information wrong. But I pulled this up, and I thought, well, we might be covering this. So some of the things we analyzed, we had 88 samples. So first, let's talk about what we did and why we did it. So in September last year, I had a tour group. It was an Australian. Um, it was an international group. We had a couple Swiss, and then we had a couple from Australia. And the people from Australia, one was a soil scientist. He has his master's degree, and he teaches around the world to farmers and universities how to best do soil, how to best do farming that doesn't destroy the soil. And so when he came out here, he beforehand asked, "Is there something we could do, like to use his knowledge or his abilities?" I said, "Well, we don't have any research plan, but you'll get to see the site." So when they came out here, I usually bring out Dr. Sally Brock Touton. He doesn't live too far away, like half a day's drive, and he's the retired geologist who's been studying the site here in Turkey. He's a Turkish professor of geology, and he's been studying this since when it first hit the press, basically back in 1984, 85. More recent press, I should say, not the 1960s. And so he has the best knowledge. He could tell you almost about every stone out there, and so I become good friends with him and his wife and family. So it's great to have him here. And so on that tour, him and so Sally and Bill, the soil scientist from Australia, I mentioned to them that we were taking some photos just down below the site at a corner in the road that we call the Ron Wyatt corner. This is where Ron thought was the best place to take a photo, his favorite spot, I should say. and you can see the arc site in the visitor center above. It's a good angle because of how the boat formation is tilted a little bit towards the west side of that valley. And so we're there, and I said, "Hey guys, look at the grass growing inside the arc formation." They even flew drone flights, whether before, or after the tour, or during the tour, and I was showing them the photographs, and it was like the grass inside the boat was yellow and different color versus the grass growing just right outside. And so, suggesting that there's something going on differently inside with the soil to affect the plants. And so I said, could you guys design a soil test to figure this out? Like, what's going on? Is it just there's less water? The ark was covered inside and out with pitch. So as the wood is decaying and this pitch compound is affecting maybe how water enters, or is it just because this is a decayed ancient boat, and that would affect then the grass color and the nutrients. So they were kind of, especially, I remember Bill was like, well, I don't know. We'll see what we can get. I said, hey, that's like what we did in the GPR. We bring in people, we do the work, we don't know what the results are, and bam, we get these really interesting results with the right angles and, the parallel lines and distinct structure with the GPR. So with the soil, we didn't know where we'd get with the soil test. And so they did it. They designed a test that had 88 samples because, again, we didn't want to just take one sample inside and then one sample outside as a control, to do stats. To analyze this, you have to get a whole bunch of samples, and then you can run the mathematical formulas and all that against these results and understand if there's really a difference across the whole site or not. Just like walking in a field, you could see some brown dirt, and over here you can see some red dirt. So depending on where you get that sample, it could affect the result. One could be higher in copper, one could be higher in iron. So we did 88 samples at 22 sites. And then these were analyzed at Ataturk University by Dr. Salih Bayraktutan, the geologist. That was where he used to work. By December, I remember I was bugging him, like, Salih, I was in Israel, and then I was in Switzerland for a couple months at the start of this year. And so I kept bugging Dr. Bayraktutan, and I was telling Salih, you need to get this to me. I really can't wait. We've done the hard work. Now get it to the lab. So he prepped everything. He had to like dry out the samples and everything. And again, we didn't label, like, the lab did not know like this group was inside the arc or this was outside. We just had random numbers and letters like A1, A2, things like that. And so the lab didn't know anything. They get the samples, they do the testing, and they send us the results. And then Sally sends me a WhatsApp message, and it's like a blurry photograph of the results. I'm in Switzerland. I'm like, no, um, you're. I was asking him, you're going to have to get a better camera because I really needed to see this. And so, anyways, did I lose you?
No, I'm still here. I was just,
Oh,
I was just enjoying
no,
the story.
okay, you'll have to edit that part. I'm sorry, because I know you mentioned your computer could crash. I was like, oh no, maybe you got
No, we're
offline.
good. We're live though. We're
Okay,
live, so it is what it
okay,
is.
yeah, we're all here. Sorry, guys, no editing. So let me finish the story up. So, anyways, he finally gets me a good photo, and I sent it. I thought, well, I'm not a soil scientist. Let me just upload this data, which has had all these numbers and such for each type of thing we tested for, to ChatGPT and the other ones like Grok, and he wanted to see what AI could figure out. And AI said, okay, these are the ones that are significantly different. And then I sent it obviously back to Bill, who's the soil scientist, and he even sent it to a friend of his who's an atheist, but he has his PhD in soil science, and so they all, Bill and his friend, I forget the guy's name, might have his report, but and Solly, all three of these guys matched what AI found. It's because it's math. They said, okay, these results are different than this; these are the same. And so when you asked, so that's kind of what we did. So now back to your question about what did we find. So the big thing was organic matter, which tests to see, once living material in the soil there, the percentage. Now, what critics will tell you is that, okay, hey, this site is not man-made, so it's just natural rubble that either went around basement rock or went around a rock outcrop, and formed, like, it built up material and then it formed this ship shape. Or it's actually a solid block of rock, as a couple guys claim, and it came down the mountainside. We know it's dirt; it's not a solid rock. But anyways, because of that, we want to. This actually helps disprove that those claims against the site, because what we found is the soil inside is different versus outside, especially on these three things. One is the most important, being organic matter. It shows that there's almost let me see, I think it's 2.75 or so times more organic matter inside the site versus outside. And again, if you think of Noah's Ark being a wooden ship, not a metal ship, it had metal involved, but there's organic matter. It was wood that was used to build it. So over thousands of years, as the ship decayed and got covered up with debris and sand and dirt, um, it would then just leave a chemical signature in the soil as that boat decayed versus right outside. And that's what we're seeing, because if this was the same soil inside and out, and just kind of formed a random shape, like the critics claim, then you'd have to say that the soil has to be exactly the same when you analyze it in the lab, and it's not the same. And so on top of organic matter, the pH level is eight. I think it's 8 times lower on the pH scale, and 8.23 inside versus 9 outside. Still, that I think that that's still acidic, but it shows that there's a difference going on. So someone might say, well, what does that mean for the pH level? So I asked Bill this question, the soil scientist, and he was saying, the combination of organic matter, pH levels, and the other thing that we noticed that was different was K2O, which I believe is potassium. These three elements, or things we tested for, that would be affected by a wooden object decaying underground over time. And so if you have this massive ship, you expect this type of difference in the soil. And now we've even talked to locals, like, okay, what happened before the ship showed up? And they talked to Nuri about this, and his uncle. Now, Nuri's the one who manages the business center, and he's from Uzungeli village, which is the Kurdish village right there in that valley. Now, I talked to his uncle, who was about 10 or 11 at the time, when they say the first formation showed up. The ship shape popped out of the ground, or just showed up in the valley floor, because there was some type of earthquake. He said it was either the late 40s. He doesn't know the exact date himself, or he doesn't remember. Some claim it's the month and day that Israel became a nation in May of 48. I have no proof on that one, so for myself, I don't know. But it was in the late 40s. He said before that, this whole valley floor was smooth, just regular terrain, and they would harvest the natural grass. They didn't fertilize or till the soil. They're just cutting down the grass as hay to feed the animals. Then in 48 or 49, an earthquake hit, and the whole mountainside just collapsed, became unstable, and formed this massive earth flow. But the ship shape showed up as still being smooth terrain, and not
And what
as
are the
rough.
dimensions of the what are the dimensions of the shape?
Yeah, so the ship shape is 515 feet long for the lengthwise, and then width at the widest is 134 or 138 feet for the width, I believe. So it matches exactly the biblical account. That's what people got cited. You have a ship shape in the mountains of Ararat, so you have a possible boat in the right location. But then if you want to really get the to match the Bible, you need to have the right size. You can't have like 1,000 foot long boat. Then of course it's not Noah's Ark then, or a 50 foot long boat. No, it's exactly the
It
length,
matches the
300
Royal
royal
Egyptian
Egyptian
cubit, right?
cubit. Yeah, and we know from the Book of Acts that just from history too, that Moses, being heir to the throne, or one of the princes, he would have been educated in ancient Egypt educational system. Whatever they do for the royalty, and we know from archaeology and history, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the Royal Egyptian cubit was the standard of measurement in the ancient world during like this time of the late Bronze Age of the Exodus. You have other countries using it, just like today we have the metric system outside, mainly outside the U.S. That's the standard. They had the Royal Egyptian cubit back then, and this is exactly. We've measured it on multiple times. I've been there when people have used laser. I've done it myself on Google Earth. I've seen people do it with tape measures. I helped one guy from Texas come out there, and he was on my tour a couple years ago. We did even a video that we put up on my YouTube channel of him measuring it, and I'm helping and it's a little off because he's going up and down through every it's on the ground, but through every single little curvature of the earth and all that. But it was basically 515 feet long, which is
Now,
300
one of the
resolution
things that
cubits.
one of the discoveries that I know that you guys had made not so long ago was actually the discovery of an empty corridor right near the bottom,
Ah,
in the center. Um, can you tell us a little bit about that? And also, I'm not sure because of the lidar and stuff. Were you guys able to actually see how many chambers are in the arc?
yeah. So lidar. Let me answer the question about lidar first. So lidar is useful, especially if you're in thick foliage, like forest and plant life. This site we don't have trees except for outside on the valley
Yeah, that's
floor
how they're
on the
finding
west side.
all the hidden pyramids.
Yeah, exactly. In the Aztec and Mayan and others, in Central South America areas. So that's mainly what LiDAR. Now we want to do LiDAR because this was done in 2019. They did LiDAR. So we got 500 million points with the laser, shooting, and it basically recreates the whole terrain. So we can use that later to recreate the site, whether it's for 3D modeling or for site preservation plans, to see how the site's changing. We can do it again to see if anything's changed with erosion. We're not really, LiDAR's not going to go down, meters into the soil. So, but we did it for basically recreating the site. It's kind of a technique like photogrammetry, but high resolution. I don't know what exactly it was, a 5 or 6 centimeter resolution or less. I have to check the report. But anyway, so we did that in 2019. Now, in regards to the news you're talking about the chambers, the tunnels, which we believe are hallways for the Ark. Yeah, so in 2019, we scanned the boat. It was a 4-day project, and they used two different types of antennas: 200 megahertz, 250 megahertz, and 100 megahertz. So the higher the megahertz, the higher the resolution, but the less penetration. So you can think of like the 250. We're getting depths down to I want to say 7 meters, maybe a little more. So that's 20 feet or so. Um, Now with the 100 megahertz, you can go a lot deeper, but less resolution. So like if I were to put this remote underground, let's say 15 meters down, or let's say 20 feet. Um, the 100 megahertz probably wouldn't see that. I mean, it might see where we dug the hole to put it in, but they use really high uh, frequencies. I'm sorry, just had a trip today, and anyways, my brain's half asleep. They use high frequencies on concrete, and so you can then see rebar metal like right through this hardened concrete, and they can see if it's if it's decaying or something. So they use 1600 megahertz. So the 100 went the deepest. We had again 250 and a 100 megahertz because we believe most of the boat is preserved deeper in the soil, and so this gives you more resolution than ERT can, even though ERT can go deeper. So you use different tools to do different things, no problem. So the 100 megahertz showed us some interesting things. Now, when we first got the data back, the one archaeologist, he found a whole series of right angles with the 250 data, 250 megahertz antenna data,
And
and we
again,
also
for the
saw with
people
that
that don't
same.
know, right angles do not exist in nature.
Yeah, yeah. Usually you don't see it. In fact, that's what he said. He's being cautious because he didn't excavate yet, and basically his report said, this is the best place to dig. This is very unique. Whether it's natural or man-made, we need to dig. But he said he highlighted that part of the boat. He said this is distinct. You see a whole series of right angles, and he called them structure with
That
depth. I think that's called
that kind of
because
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
get on
that
ahead.
kind of brings me to a question. Were you guys ever thinking, and I know it would probably be bad for the structure, but were you guys ever thinking of boring down into to actually go into these chambers?
Yeah, so that is part of. I mentioned earlier how we're like what we're doing right now. Like, forming the plans for the next steps, identifying the teams of people, the companies or scientists who can come do the work.
Okay.
Making the budgets and all the hard work you do behind the scenes before all the fun starts. And so one of them is coring. Let's just say we just well, so I had Ryan Moreau out here. He's a good friend of mine, and he does tours to Sinai and Arabia. He's on Fox News as a national security analyst. He's been in the news recently. I don't know if you've seen some of the news about the things, his reports he works on in regards to funding for terror groups in the U.S. So he's pretty well known in certain circles. He came out here and he's helped us in the past with the renovation of the visitor center back in 2022 and helping promote the site as Noah's Ark. And he finally came out and saw it this summer. So it was awesome seeing my friend out here again. Now we told him what. Now he pays for this extra special level, like it's $200 a month or something for Grok and Chat GPT. And so I asked him, I said, look, we're trying to identify the right coring technology that can drill down, preserve the core, and not ruin the data. Because what happened in 1988, Dr. Sally Brock-Tutin, he was involved with this effort. Him and his partner from the U.S., Dr. John Baumgartner, a creationist, a Christian, who was interested in the site at the time, not anymore, but at that time they were interested. They had just radared the site the year before with GPR, and I think they used a 500 mega. No, they used a 200 something megahertz or 120. Anyways, so the next year they decided to do coring. Now, according to John Baumgartner in his emails with me, they did 4 cores. One, they tried to go through the big boulder in the middle of the rock, and they stopped. The one other one just to the east of that went straight through, didn't find anything interesting. And then 2 above it, near the pointed end, he said they hit bedrock within 4 or 5 meters. He was claiming. I might have the depth wrong, but anyway, there was 4 cores he claimed they did, and they said it basically shows that this is a shallow feature, this boat shape, and it can't be Noah's Ark. I talked to Sally about that, and he said, no. He said, I was there. They had been him and John. They rented the wrong equipment, or they were provided by the government really bad coring equipment that wasn't strong enough to go down through rock, and on top of it, it was a water cooling system to keep the bit. It's going through soil and rock, and so the bit on the end drilling through on this system was water cooling. So think about this: you're trying to get soil, which is loose soil out there. It's not a solid rock formation like some people say, and you're trying to preserve that whole core of soil that comes up. What's the worst thing you could use? Water, because that water is going to just
turn it all
wash
into
it all
mud.
away. Yeah, here's what he said. He said by the time they pulled out the core, every time and he said it's only he remembers 2 times. He said yes, they tried to core the big rock. He stopped them. He said, hey, this is the wrong equipment. But he said they only did 2 other times outside in the boat formation. He said it was useless data. He said when they pulled the core up, it was either all like pebbles in the bottom, like little gravel pieces, because all the real data washed away because of the soil. And he said, no, we did not hit bedrock on that upper end by the pointed end. So there's a difference of opinion on what actually happened on those 2 to 3 cores done over 10 years, 20 years ago. So no, be 30, yeah, 30 years, 40 years, late 80s. So anyways, no one's done anything like that since. Everyone done, ERT, GPR, multiple times. Even the Turks have done it in 2021. Soil science work like we did and Ron did, but no one has excavated a site, which understandably is difficult to get permission to do because it's a very fragile site. But most importantly, no one has gotten deep inside the formation to pull out samples. And so that's really high on our list. And so we have identified. So when Ryan was here, back to my story, when Ryan was here, we asked him, hey, why don't you ask this, $200 a month AI system you're paying for, which he uses for other research, why don't you find out for us what's the best technique? And sure enough, it found something I never even heard of, and even Sally, he said, wow, I never heard of that technology. And so we found a company in the U.S. that does have they're the main, I guess, vendors for this. And so I started watching their YouTube videos, and I contacted them. I still have more calls to do with them. But they do have the drilling system, one of them here in Turkey, they told me, at a mining site. So there's a lot of hoops we need to go through, but we're just starting that process. But this technology uses, I won't say it all, but because we want to be able to do this and not have others ruin our efforts. But basically,
you got to keep
yeah,
it secret.
Yeah, but this technology will preserve. Like the whole point is that it will preserve the soil, like perfectly preserved sample. They said, yeah, and from their YouTube videos and what they have on their website, and then I even looked up just the technology itself, and not what they do as a company, but the technology. Yes, it will preserve the core, and it'll go right through soil or rock. So we're excited about that. That's part of our effort, including other types of geophysical survey work finishing our soil analysis. There are other rare earth minerals and other types of tests that we need to do with our current samples that will show what type of carbon is in there, whether it's newer or older, things that can, the critics might jump on us. So, we want to do a complete, thorough study. So all of that, we're hoping to continue, whatever we do this year will be great. And what we can't finish before winter hits, we'll continue through winter, such with analysis of the material we have. And then the actual field work will continue, in the summer next year, late spring when the site's not muddy. And so, but regard to the what we talked about earlier about the chamber, especially the big one you see in the middle, and the hallways going through, the guy who originally did that work, he basically dropped off, or basically didn't communicate with us anymore. I don't know if this archaeologist didn't care about the site or he saw how controversial it was. So we couldn't use him. He did the initial work that found the right angles. So I talked to Dr. Sally Breyer-Tuton, the geologist, when I first met him in 2000. I was in my second and third trip out here. The year after Ron White had passed away, I came out here with some friends, and we connected my first time with Sally. And then that was it. I then talked to him until 2021, I think, or 22. And so when we did our 2019 GPR work, I didn't know, I had not reconnected with him. And so when I finally reconnected with him, I said, "Hey, we have this data. I think more information can come out of it. We need a second party or a third party to look at it versus the guy who looked at it back in 2020, 2019, who's no longer communicating with us." So he said, "Oh, I have the perfect person. She has 30 or 40 years experience in the industry. She has her own company. She's a geophysicist from the United States on the East Coast." And so and he had talked to her about it, and she was willing to do this for free. So I thought, "Oh, that's great." So anyways, I sent her all the data, all the raw data. In fact, we had to go back to the original, the company in America who did the work for us in 2019, because there's things that I was missing in my file. Like they gave me the report and some of the data, but there's a lot of stuff that was missing. So because she was telling me I need this file and that file. So I thankfully passed it on to the company. They still had it in their backup archives. And so we got everything to her that she needed. And within 6 months, she's doing it on her free time. And so but within 6 months, she had discovered this tunnel. In fact, the initial email, I think it was an email. She contacted me and said, "Hey, did you guys drill, or did you know if somebody put a utility line down through this site?" And I was like, "No, it's the middle of a field, or a mountainside in this valley." And I talked to the locals. No one's ever lived there. The village of Uzungeli has always been up on the west side of the valley. So there'd be no reason to put a utility line through it. And so anyway, she said, "Yeah, there's a tunnel. It's just still, it's not filled in, and it's still walkable. If you're tall, you have to hunch over, or short, you can stand up in it." And so she
Was that
showed
the
me the
only one
data.
she
We did this.
found? Just one?
Well, she found one straight one going down from the tip to the middle where the rock is. But then here's the other interesting thing: she found a broken up one following the inside edge of the boat formation from the pointed tip going on the inside edge. And then on the eastern side, no data. It's like everything's been filled in or it's gone. But if you assume a symmetry with the arc being designed with hallways to access the rooms and cages or whatever, yes, a central corridor with side corridors makes perfect sense. And again, if
And
this is just
in most likelihood,
random,
it's been said that it should be about 3 tiers, right?
yeah, well, so it depends. Again, we need a core drill. It depends on what was preserved. Of course, it looks like the roof is gone. The first or the top deck, whatever how you want to count that as deck 3 or deck 1, with that top deck, there's bits and pieces that the GPR at is it 2 or 3 meters down, they're showing a layer, but it's not like perfectly preserved. You can think, again, this is a ship that's the layers or anything closest to the surface would be more decayed, and all you get would be what's in the soil, like fragmented or the chemistry. But with the ERT results and with our GPR, especially the 100 megahertz, we're seeing layers deeper down, suggesting the ship is more preserved than even what Ron White thought. Because what we're now saying is the middle deck, especially the ERT is saying the middle of the deck, which is more preserved, and this is where the tunnel is at, which would be the central hallway. is on that layer 4 to 6 meters down. Ron thought that was just one of the floors, and then the next deck down. If I might get this, I don't want to misquote Ron, but basically what he thought was the hull of the ship, because he thought it was shallow and had collapsed and decayed away, except for the hull mainly. Um, we're seeing that that's not the hull of the ship. That's actually the middle deck, and the hull is deeper down. So
Okay.
now the radar can't go as deep as the ERT that John Larson did in 2014. But we have some new technology, not new technology, but new techniques that have not been used on the boat that Dr. Sally Brock Teuton wants to use that will then help us verify and validate the ERT results that others have gotten. So the best thing to do is use all these different technologies, combine the results, and see if you can match. And so, for example, the ERT that John did, it's not high resolution, but it goes really deep. So he found this open voice as high density, suggesting that because he uses electricity resistivity, so like air pocket like this room, if it's underground, it would really slow down electricity going through the air versus water or metal. And so he found a place that he said this has to be an air pocket, a big open space. Well, this is the exact same spot, except now we have the actual shape of it, high resolution, with our 2019 GPR data that was gathered by a different company. So now the GPR is matching ERT. GPR is giving us the really high resolution of that spot. And so this tunnel or central hallway leads right to this central, I call the atrium. So you think of Noah's Ark being 3 decks. How do you access each of the decks? There's no, who knows if they had an elevator, but we don't think they had an elevator. So they probably had a ramp system, or and what about the fresh air or light? It only
Yeah.
says there was one window. There's things that we just don't know whether they had artificial lighting or not. But still, to access each one of the layers, you need a big open spot. Whether it's having a pulley system to bring up supplies or feed the animals, or just a ramp system inside the boat to walk up and down between the floors. And if you look at the Ark Encounter Ark in Kentucky, I don't know if you've been out there, but they
Not
have
yet.
a
No.
central atrium system too. This open air area that opens up between all the decks, except theirs is in the center of the boat, going all the way down the lengthwise. Ours, we're actually seeing on site, so we can say the real data. So they were creative, and they have and that was true. The boat probably had the central atrium, because what we're seeing on the real site, instead of going straight down the site, this open air system between all the decks, we're seeing it as a central hole, this big void that's rectangular, square shape that
Right in the
goes
middle.
at least from 4 to 6 meters down, all the way down. Because again, this is the 100 megahertz, so we go really deep, all the way down to 13 meters, and that's when we get the last data. So it could probably go much deeper, but 13 meters
So
in
it's more like
U.S.
of a square rotunda kind of.
Yeah. So when you think of 13 meters, that's 40 some feet down, 41 feet. So you're looking at this room that's this a big open chamber. And so when this lady found it, she's like, "What's here?" And she wants to do a scientific paper. So usually when they do that, they don't publish anything until the paper's out, and then it hits the news. We might have jumped the gun on that one, but so earlier this year with the soil test, the GPR results, the new one, hit the news. So it went around the world. So that you had Fox, you have New York Post, you have a lot of British newspapers, Australian news, picking up the story about even Turkish news. Some of them, many had details wrong, but the general gist of it was okay. The soil is different inside and out versus out, and we have possibly the mapping of the corridors. Now, in regards to actual rooms, what's really interesting, and this one was not. I don't think any of the news reports or interviews I've done, we put this out yet. Maybe one, I don't know. I don't remember because we did so many. But that central corridor, not the corridor, but that central cavity, the atrium in the middle that goes down to 40 plus feet. What we're seeing below that, below the corridor that goes to it at the 4 to 6 meter depth, the next level down, we're seeing very faint hashtags. You could say they're like these right angles, but they're making like marks on the data. It can really deep down, and then this result is kind of faint. And so we have these light blue versus the soil being dark blue on the results we're looking at. and suggesting that there's some dense objects that are forming patterns on the next deck below. So it's ceiling support. It could be walls to rooms that are all filled in with mud now. Who knows? But we're seeing that on the upper end. Now, Ron always believed that that upper end, which is the southern end, it goes from the rock to the pointed end. He believed that that section there was the best preserved, just from his data. So versus the south end. And so what's interesting, we're seeing all this interesting result, and the new stuff is all from that upper end. So there's more we'd like to do. In fact, Sally, part of, there's a couple of techniques that he wants to use to go to compare to the ERT that was done before by others, including the Turkish government. They did their ERT, which is using electricity to map what's below the soil. But there's a couple other techniques that he has listed, and we have identified the companies that can do some. I won't mention what they are, but they can see below the soil. And so it'll be another type of technology that we can then compare to what we've done already, what others have done. So
So
it's
I'd
very
like to
exciting
ask
because,
you, Andrew.
yeah,
Yeah. Uh. Exactly. Well, leading with your tour and stuff. Exactly. How do you think Noah was a giant? Do you think he was over 12 feet tall?
yeah. So I know Ron did, because he believed they had found one of the tombs out there that he would associate with Mrs. Noah. Was a female grave that had a 15 or 18-foot long stone box, and then he believed the person inside was between 12 to 15 feet long. Um, today you can say basketball players are giants. If a pygmy from Africa came and saw one, there's different sized people today. But in regards to, we were just out here with this professor. We went to that village where they had dug up this giant grave back in '85 or '84, where Ron thought was Noah and his wife's in that area. And we know two other stories besides what Ron was told by the police, because they interrogated the guy who helped the American dig it up illegally. This American guy paid a local villager like $200 or $300, and then this guy ends up getting caught by the police after Ron finds the grave dug up with David Fazold in March of 1985, and so Ron reports the grave robbery. So they caught this guy, and then they torture him by pulling out his fingernails. And he tells them what he saw. He said we found a stone box. I don't know how deep it was, but on my tours before 2022, you could still measure the trench. There's still a depression there, even though it's been years later since '85. You can still see where this grave was. It's a huge trench. We measured it. It was 18 feet long. In the old videos of Ron, you can see Fazl standing in the trench, and I think it's even on my YouTube channel. You see David Fazl there. And he's like doing this, and he's like standing in this place where they illegally
No,
dug up
I
the
think you
grave.
mentioned that you give tours of Noah's grave.
Well, I showed them the area where Ron found these big headstones that had the story of it had 8 figures, had the arc on a crescent wave, and had the rainbow above it. But the biggest figures of the 8 people carved, one was a man, and then the tallest was the tallest was a man. The next one was a woman, and the one headstone, he said the eyes were closed, and then on the second headstone, both the tallest figures, the man and woman, eyes were closed. And so he believed that it basically told the story of Noah and his wife passing away. But so there's one grave there still, who knows where, and thankfully no one has found it so far, unless it's been robbed in antiquity. But when these guys robbed the one grave in '85, they destroyed the headstones. So we only have the very old blurry video clips from Ron's videos from '77, and that's it. And they destroyed the house that was there. Actually, turns out to be an Armenian chapel built maybe on top of the house, but this area, that's where he found the graves. And when I was out here, as I mentioned earlier with this professor, we talked to the locals, and they told us another story that I've known for a couple of years, but I wanted this professor to hear it. It's about giants, what they saw. One guy who lives in that village, he saw a giant, a skull, and from the waist up, they had covered one about 2 to 3 meters below the soil. And part of their just doing, I think they were excavating for a building foundation back in the mid '80s. About the same time, he was early teens, and he said that he remembers they found it and they got scared. There was an awful smell. It was around, actually. This one, he said it was not a stone box, but it was in a wooden casket. But the wood was still pretty soft, he said, but very smelly, like some type of chemicals were involved. Or, anyways, they covered it right back up. but he said it was huge. He said it was 2 or 3 times the size of what they think a regular human skull was. And then I know of another story by another local who said they saw a giant skull and it was brought to him by a villager from the same village. And he actually remembered taking a picture with the skull on a shelf or on a table or whatever countertop, and right beside it, he put these carton of cigarette boxes, a case of that you put all these different cigarettes in, and use as a comparison. He sent it to a friend, the photo over email, and this was back in 2001. I think this happened. Sadly, some other individual got involved and was trying to pay $10,000 for the skull. It scared the villager, and then he took off. We basically said he doesn't have a skull anymore, and there's no what happened to it. So he got scared, and I don't know if he buried the evidence or what happened, but initially he was going to sell it for $300, and then when the other guy showed up and said, "I'll give you 10,000," that scared him. It's like, why is this? Is this supposed to be very important, or I'll get in big trouble? So now we have three different stories of from the one village of giants. So was Noah
And is
one?
this the Valley of the
Something.
Eight?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Can you
And
tell us a
so
little bit about the Valley of the Eight and whether they know
yeah,
they
yeah.
that name is actually coming from the eight people from the Ark, right? Or
Yeah, and so here's what's interesting about that. On the map, you're not going to find Valley of the Eight or anything on Google Maps, or I haven't seen even ancient maps say that, like older maps from like 100 years ago. I've seen nothing. But when you talk to the locals, because Ron repeats that, he says it was called either the region or Valley of the Eight or the village of the Eight. And this is what he said he heard in 77, late 70s, when he made his first trip out here, and then 79 maybe. But definitely 77, he's told this name. Now, if you look on Google Earth now, it's called Saglaksuyu or Salaksuyu. Um, and this means healthy water because there's a big spring there. It's iron rich, or like reddish type water. So it's called healthy water. But on the old Armenian name for the site is Arzep or Artzep. And that's an Armenian female name. So this village was a walled village, very important. It had 4 churches, or at least one main church and 3 other chapels. It had a monastery, or 1 or 2 monasteries or schools. There's 4 gates into this village. So these are things we're learning. In fact, when we were at the university last week, Agri University, one of the professors, he is a really good contact now, but he basically told us about some of his research. I guess in 1805 or 1806, Napoleon had one of his guys come out this way to reach Iran because he wanted to get some type of agreement between France and the Persian Empire back then. And so this guy comes through this area, and he mentions going through Arzap because he wanted to skip Dobazet, back then called Bayezid, because he heard that the pasha, or the governor ruling this area, was a very harsh man, and so he's trying to get around them. So he goes through the village of Eight, Arzap. He mentions the name. He mentions that it was walled, but he gets caught there. He doesn't explain too much about the village, but when I talked to the locals and where does this other name comes from, the one guy who saw the giant burial as a kid, he said, "Oh, well, we call it the Valley of the Eight because there are 8 springs or 8 ravines or valleys that feed into the Central Valley." So if you think about it, though, the locals there today, they're not original, put it that way. That village was a famous Armenian village. So the people living there today are Kurds, and so they don't know all the names or reason why things are named or the original story. So you ask locals about something that's ancient, they're going to repeat what they heard or saw on YouTube or whatever. But so his story was, okay, yeah, we do call it the Valley of the Eight, but it's because of springs. But if from a biblical standpoint, we know that there were 8 people on the ark, so we can associate the valley with the story of Noah and the flood. So.
now, slightly after Noah's flood and stuff, that part of Turkey and Armenia and all that was all the land of Aratu, right? It was all one kingdom.
Yes, so that's where we get the name Ararat. The English word Ararat comes from the kingdom of Urartu. This was mainly an Iron Age kingdom. So you think of the divided monarchy, King David, Solomon, and afterwards the Iron Age. So much later, after even when Moses was around during the Exodus, when he wrote the book of Genesis. So when he wrote the Ark land in the mountains of Ararat, Urartu, this kingdom might have just been a small area at that time, or the scribes changed the name later. They said, okay, well, we're going to call this the kingdom of Ararat, because that's what people, or two, because that's what people know it now. It'd be nice to see the original manuscript that Moses wrote to see what name he used. But definitely this area, in fact, where I'm at right now in Doba Zet, there's a big Urartu castle right above, overlooking the city by the Ishak Pasha, Pasha Isaac's palace, which is a museum now. And so, and then of course, right across the valley from me, right at the base of Mount Ararat, they're finding lots of different settlements, castles, ruins of Urartu, the Urartians, the people that lived out here. So their kingdom, at the greatest extent, the biggest territory they had was during the Iron Age. So much later, after Moses wrote the Book of Genesis, but it does cover the drop on our site, Mount Ararat. It goes all the way north to Armenia, into in south into Iran. Their archaeological remains. They were, at the museum
Have you
gone
ever
when you go on
heard
our 5 day tour.
have you ever heard the kingdom of Aratu is possibly also the location of the Garden of Eden?
Yes, many people have sent me messages on that one, because it does come down to in the kingdom of Urartu, the modern day Tigris and Euphrates rivers start here, and there's some other rivers that we use different names now. So people have tried to then associate these
Pishon
different
and
rivers
the
with, yeah, with the four. Now, so the other, so in ancient, I shouldn't say ancient, but on older maps, like 200-300 years ago, you'll see these Armenian maps that have the Garden of Eden listed in their territories, mainly around Lake Bond, which is the capital of Urartu, is right there on the lake shore. Um, of course, other people today try to put it down near the Persian Gulf. I've seen Joel Kramer with
yeah.
Expeditions Bible; they do that. Others, I think myself, it's a big unknown, and I'll just briefly say that the flood was a global event that destroyed the earth and changed the surface, and it was one. I really do believe there was one big continent that got split up too before the flood. During the flood process, and right after the things moved around. A lot of creationists believe that. If the earth has changed so much, this area of Turkey used to be underwater for part of the time. Well, of course, the whole world was underwater, but
Mhm.
even before the flood, looks like this area had an inland sea. They call it the Teta Sea, and so because of that, that's why they don't find dinosaurs out here. Because there was, a land, the land dinosaurs that they don't have the fossils of them in this part of Turkey. So if you look at this whole area being volcanic and probably pushed upwards because of the continents colliding, during this whole splitting up of the big giant continent during the flood or right afterwards, um, that would be very difficult to say. Okay, this river existed right before the flood, so then that's where the Garden of Eden is. If you and I, for example, this actually happened. People who left Europe and they went to America, 300-400 years ago, 500 years ago. They take the names of their previous locations, cities, rivers, mountains, and they use those same names again in America, North America. So same thing after the flood. The survivors of the flood, once the descendants are spreading out and heading into like the plains of Shinar and heading south from Noah's Ark, as they're going along, they say, "Oh, this reminds us of the river before the flood called the Euphrates, or this is the Tigris River." So they use some of the same names. That's how I think it is. So then to say, well, then that means the Garden of Eden's right here, possibly. But with the event of the flood waters destroying everything like that and making a big muddy soup, I think it would be very difficult to locate the Garden of Eden. When I watched Joel Kramer's video, and this is a side topic, but he was trying to say, well, this river is the Pishon, I think, in Saudi Arabia. But if you look at where he's putting this Saudi River, which
Yeah,
is a
it's in
dry
the ocean,
riverbed
right?
now. Yeah, and it goes down into like all these rivers where he was putting the Garden of Eden. I have two biggest things with his two biggest issues. Number one, the Bible says 4 rivers flowed out of the Garden of Eden. He was having them flow into the Garden of Eden. Maybe he
Yeah.
thinks the Earth elevation changed because
Yeah,
so
no,
he
and
had
over there in
this ancient.
Armenia, where the possible location is, that is the headwaters. That's where the waters actually come down from, right?
Well, yeah, right here in Turkey, actually. Yeah, so you have the Tigris is just south of Lake Van, which is the largest saltwater, largest lake in Turkey, and then the Euphrates, one of the main tributaries or rivers that forms the Euphrates is the Murat River, and that's just north of Lake Van. So this is all Turkey here, and on ancient maps, yes, you have Armenian maps showing these, rivers coming in their land, but they were saying is Armenia. So uh, possibly.
I
But
seen
again,
I
these are
seen
people.
actually seen a documentary that had a lot of good
Yeah.
information. How there's even a mountain there that's made out of really bright red clay, where hey, it's possibly where God formed Adam from, and also that
Oh,
uh
yeah.
the
Okay.
the word that they get God Eden is like supposed to be like a kind of like a gated garden, and there's actually an area out there that's surrounded by mountains in that same way. uh I don't know, and also that
Oh,
if you go slightly
very.
to the east of that, there's a place called Knock. You know, and it's kind of
Yeah.
a like a nod to Nod. Yeah,
Yeah.
where Cain
Okay.
was
Yeah.
banished to.
It's all possible. Again, it's also possible that they reuse the names that they knew from before the flood. With the land changing so much in this area around the world, I'm sure mountains existed where there wasn't mountains, and then plains existed where there used to be mountains. And so, back to what he was like, Joel Kramer had identified as the Pishon for his Garden of Eden near the Persian Gulf. Um, that Saudi River, if you look at it, like that wouldn't even exist during the flood. What he's identifying now is a post-flood dry riverbed. So to say, well, this is the river existed and it didn't change and it was like preserved right there in Saudi, going all the way down to his Garden of Eden, I think that's highly unlikely. I love his channel; he does great work, but on that point, I do disagree. So
Yeah,
yeah,
same here. I love his work
I know
too, but
people.
that is one thing I do
Yeah,
disagree with.
yeah, so it's possible the Ark landed right near where the Garden of Eden was. Um, my favorite theory for the Garden of Eden
Now, do you
is
think it
if you,
started there? Did the arc start there, or did it end up
yeah, I
flowing
don't.
there? Because I think
Well,
it,
well, again, the Bible doesn't say. So you're looking at, I don't believe in the flat Earth. You're looking at the globe.
I don't either.
Uh, so somewhere on the globe, the Ark was built, and so there's a certain percentage that it could have been right where it's landed. I don't think
But
so because
basically,
basically that.
from the way that it's made, it's more made to stay afloat, not to travel. It's pretty much just made to
Yeah,
stay
God would have
afloat.
to blow it with the wind. There's no sails, no engine, but it did cut through the waves. That's why it's pointed in and it had the ship shape. People misunderstand that and they think it has to be a barge. For the open, rough seas, which was the global flood, no, you need a ship shape to the best survive. But if it, I don't think it was built in this area mainly because this area um, was underwater. I think this was an inland sea even before the flood. So then you had it drying out right after the flood. You have the plate tectonics, so you have uplifting. So now this area is dry, obviously, and of course the flood waters are gone. But you don't find any land mammals out in this area at all, which for pre-flood type, like dinosaurs, whatever. So I know people watch if people watching this are evolutionists, they'll be like, like everything we're saying is gonna make them go crazy. So I hope so. But at any rate, no. So someone actually, I think it was Joel Richardson sent me a message on this because someone had suggested that as a critique. Say, oh no, the Drupner site is actually where they built the ark, and not the remains of the ark. So they think it's like the form. So I was like, well, there's a couple of issues with that. Number one, how does the form of, let's say it is a mold, but why would they need, like, you look at shipyards today and you don't really need the mold of it like that to per se to build the ark. But if it was a mold of the ark, not the actual ark, how did it survive the global flood? It would be, that whole site would have been destroyed, the whole construction site. Number two, that the Druppen site is on, most people don't know this, but that the area we're in right here, and so unless you come out here, this is a very volcanic area. So you have lots of lava and all this, type of volcanic rock, basalt. But there are areas where you have exposed sedimentary rock, meaning sediments that turn to rock, like limestone and sandstone, things that are laid down by water. And guess what? That ridge of mountains that the Druppener site is in is not a volcano area. Nearby is Ararat, so everything is volcanic around it. But that is sedimentary rock. You see a big limestone ridge right above the arc. It's sitting on itself, a mix of different types of material in that valley floor. But then right below it is more sedimentary rock. We find all these fossils inside of it. So this cannot be, if you look at stratigraphy, the flood laid down those layers. On top of that, you find the Druppener shape. So the Druppener shape has to be the the remains of Noah's Ark and not like the ship-shaped building site of Noah's Ark. And so I know a couple people who are trying to throw that out. But anyways,
Yeah. One thing. Have you heard of basically the story of Emerker and the Lord of Arata?
no, I've heard those names, but I don't. No, I haven't researched that. This is the
Yeah,
Tower of Babel.
it's something like that.
No.
It's actually it is discovered in cuneiform, and it's basically the story. And they believe that it's actually Nimrod writing to Noah, saying, "Hey, I'm the king of the world. Basically, now you have to send me tribute because I'm trying to build this tower, and basically, if the Lord of Arata is actually Noah, he tricks him, and I guess what's it called Nimrod is known for being a Nimrod, not being that smart. So yeah, Noah tricks him about 3 times and actually helps him uh, fend off a famine out there. Yeah.
No, okay. So I've heard the name, but no, I have not done research on that story. That'd be cool if it's more evidence to prove for Nimrod's existence and post-flood activity and what he was doing. He was, Bible says he built the first cities. Of course, his name is also associated with the Tower of Babel. Um, so yeah, that's another big topic in research. And people are trying to find that location and proposing, traditionally down south in Iraq. But you do have a group that's looking
Well,
in southern Turkey.
have you ever checked out the Ziggurat of Eridu and the possibility of it being the the Tower of Babel?
Not once I get it, turn on my air conditioner. All these lights are heating up my room. Um, no, I have not been to Iraq. It's on my bucket list, and I would like to go down with some locals who know that area. And then I've already been in contact with a guide down there who lives there, and I know some friends who were actually on my tour in 2024, 23, 23, to not to Saudi Arabia. Then they also went out to the Ark tour here, and then they invited me to go with them to Iraq. So they went. There was a group of Singapore women, and so they had an amazing time. They told me all about it. They got me the name of the guide that they used, but plus I know of another one. But at any rate, it's slowly I'm making some plans. I'd love to see all the sites. You know, Turkey has a lot to offer on its own, but then you have all these other countries: Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, that are really hard to get into. That have a lot of biblical history and post flood history. Uh, Besides the other like Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Saudi. So there's so much you could do. But no, I have not been down to Iraq. I've watched videos about it from different people. Those who say the Tower of Babel's that site, or those who I think Kramer puts out the traditional Babel being Babylon. But I think who's the professor who chose that site that you mentioned? He wrote a couple
I don't
books.
I don't know. I've kind of seen it from a
Um,
couple different like
And so you had different sites
uh,
being proposed. Um, yeah, for me, I don't think the Tower of Babel was a ziggurat. I think it was actually something they said they wanted to build a tower so they can escape any future flood. The ziggurats are temple sites, and they're not super tall. So I don't know. I wasn't there, so
yeah,
I
it
do
brings
like
about a lot of other conspiracy theories, like maybe
yeah.
that's why the U.S. went in there to find out. I mean, why they started a valley instead of on top of a mountain if they were really trying to reach the
Yeah,
heavens.
well, that's why Ron Lott. You think even before all of this discussion, Ron White was looking at southern Turkey, and he believed it would look like today, like a natural hill, like the remains would be all covered up, and maybe a broken. When God destroyed it, that all the pieces would have fallen down, but he believed it was an actual big tower. So I've seen people write articles and from different creationists and biblical studies websites that they want to say it's in northern Syria. So they're looking on the banks of the Euphrates, where a lot of these old cities were built. So Euphrates, starts near where I'm at, but when it gets to the Mesopotamia area, it comes out of into the plains there of southern Turkey. We have Urfa and Göbekli Tepe and all these other interesting sites, and then it enters Syria and then Iraq. So I yeah, uh,
Can you
many sites. I'd love to go explore all those sites just to see. Um,
well, one of the sites that you do actually do your tour on is Globeki Tepe. Can you tell us a little bit about that site?
Yeah, it's a very interesting they call it a pre-pottery site, meaning that there's again, just like they have different ages listed for the metals mainly used. Pre-pottery is really old. I don't believe in all the dates again, but they don't use pottery. It's all stone tools. So they didn't either the group that was living there, the civilization, and I say civilization because this culture is there's more than one site. Now, first they thought, there's one site only, and so they were excavating. Everyone's excited about uh, rethinking what they thought Stone Age man could do. Hunter gatherers and those starting early farming. They're like, wow, they actually built this huge, site with T-shaped pillars and megalithic type site. So now that they've looked around that whole area of southeast Turkey, there's 14 plus sites that have the same style of a central, you can call it market. Some people say it's a temple. Some say it's an astronomical observatory. Others say it's a memorial to the flood. There's animals carved on it, but we also have people carved on. So one of the latest news a couple weeks ago, I saw they found a statue of a person in the base of one of the walls in Göbekli Tepe, like it's a foundation deposit, like a offering. This person, a figurine carved on. I don't know how big the rock was in the photo, but so a stone statue. If you go on our tours, we take you there, and we have time depending on the group size. And we also go to Karan Tepe, which is nearby, and making the news, especially last year. And some of the figurines they found there. So you see two of these 14 sites. But we definitely go to the Şanlıurfa Museum, which is a huge museum. And you spend almost all day there. But that museum has all the artifacts, like the most important ones from all these different cultures and these things. How does it fit into the biblical chronology? Definitely, it's post flood. The stones are made from sedimentary rock that was laid down by the floodwaters. That later they carved into limestone rock that was later carved into these pillars. But because it's pre
So it could be
pottery,
one of the first
it's
cities built after the flood.
exactly. Well, yeah, it's not even a city. I mean, they're the villages around a central site, but you have everyone in that valley, that the plain, Haran Plain, on the edges there. If you look at online maps, they have like a lot of the sites listed. You see they're spread out. So and there's not huge sites. They're not like the big Tell, like or Babylon. These are smaller sites. How do they fit? Definitely post flood, but how do they fit before or after the Tower of Babel? That I don't know. When the Tower of Babel people dispersed, they went by their language groups to different parts of the world. Did people who didn't know how to make pottery end up together by by this area of northern Mesopotamia, southern modern day Turkey? Is that, or is this people before the Tower of Babel just forming these sites? Was this people who worked on the Tower of Babel, and the Tower of Babel was nearby? These are like villages nearby, and they have these temple or whatever type of central marketplace sites built. So there's many theories, and it's so exciting though, because it's almost like it's rewriting what they thought these people knew back then. They didn't expect this at that time in Earth's history, people to be building this type of structure, these giant stone structures. So there's lots of new things have been uncovered. I like watching some of the archaeologists involved. I know the archaeologists working down there get a lot of criticism. They say, like the olive trees are destroying the site, or the footings for the covering has destroyed some of the artifacts, or the actual covering hides it, so you can't take pictures from the air anymore. So I'm thankful that someone is working the site, because we're getting this data, but not everything is a conspiracy. Is there something there that they're not telling us yet? I don't think we're at that point yet. I think there's just every time you're excavating, you're finding something new, and then they have to fit that into whatever your framework is, whether it's a biblical one or it's an ancient alien one. You think, a lot of people believe in that, or it's an evolutionist one, and they, have the long ages. So, take your pick, and then when you find this type of data, these type of archaeological sites, you then got to plug it in and say, okay, this is how it works. Of course, I believe in the Bible, so I don't believe
Now,
ancient
can
aliens.
can you tell me a little bit about can you tell me a little bit about Haran? Now, that's where the patriarchs are
Ye-
buried, right? If I'm not
yes,
mistaken,
and that's
Abraham
very
has his tomb there, and it's half a synagogue, half a mosque. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Haran itself. There's two things on our tour. We go visit down in southeast Turkey for biblical sites. Besides the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, we visit Haran. Now, most people don't realize this, but 11 of the 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Jacob, were born in Turkey, modern day Turkey. Only Benjamin was born down there near I think Bethlehem or someplace, in the Promised Land. So you have this connection up here to the start of most of the tribes of Israel down here in south of me, about a day's drive. Now, if you go to this site, it's known for its beehive homes, these traditional homes from the Middle Ages. But there's an ancient tell there, an ancient hill that goes all the way back to the time of Abraham. And we're 100% sure, like just from all the archaeological records, whether it's the Assyrians or other writers, that's Haran. It's like Jerusalem. We know where Jerusalem is; it hasn't changed. Haran is Haran. That's not debated. So when you look at that story of Abraham, this is where his father-in-law dies, Terah dies. It sounds like he leaves people behind, or there are people already living there that are his relatives. Because later, when he needs a wife for his son Isaac, he sends his servant Eleazar up back to Haran, and that's where he sees Rebecca at the well. And there is a traditional Jacob's well. Now, there's of course, I had some people who they don't realize there's a couple Jacob's wells, because wherever Jacob would go, if he didn't find a well, he would either use the well there or dig one. And
And wasn't there
so
disputes
there's a
between the wells? So he had to he actually dug multiple wells because there was
Yeah,
disputes.
yes, but like the famous one is in Shechem, and that's where Jesus met the woman at the well, which is modern day Nablus. So that well, I've been to like outside the door of the church that's built around it. I've never actually been inside because every time I've gone there,
The
the church
Shechem, that's also
courtyard,
where they 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 um they raped Abraham's daughter, right?
Dina, you're talking about Jacob's
Gina, yeah,
daughter, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, all this. I think it was Jacob's daughter because all the her brothers then killed the inhabitants, and he complains
yeah.
and you made me a stink in the
That was
land.
also at Shechem, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Mhm.
As I was there, and I've been there multiple times, but my first trip to Shechem, I went with a local who lives in one of the um, the settlements. There's like a prison almost because it's all walled and very protected. But he took me to Mount whatever the mountain on the south side is. Is that Gezerim, I think? No, there's two mountains, and then Shechem's at the bottom. The Mount of Cursing and Blessing. Anyways, we went up there, and there's a sign in the past when tourists used to go there a lot. They used to have a sign there in English and in the Hebrew and maybe Arabic, but it mentions all the times this site is mentioned in the Bible. Like I didn't know that this is where God first appeared to Abraham in the Promised Land and said, "I'll give you this land, or your descendants will be as the stars of heaven." So this sign has all the scripture listed. So a lot has happened in Shechem, but it has a Jacob well. So what I was mentioning earlier is that there is a Jacob's well that locals call it in Haran, because later when Isaac marries Rebecca, they have two kids, Esau and Jacob. Well, Jacob, because of stealing the birthright, he has to flee, and his mother Rebecca, who likes Jacob, is her favorite son, tells him, "Go to my brother," which would be his uncle Laban, who lives in Haran. So it does seem like Abraham still had family in that Haran area. Now, later, Haran becomes a big site for the sin god, which is the moon god, worship. And so you have things from Nabonidus, the father of Belshazzar, in the Daniel story. And so he comes up there. In fact, when when I was part of the excavations in 2005 and 2004, 5, and 6. 2005 and 6, especially, they were excavating in the Garden Tomb, trying to find the original tunnels where Ron was looking for the Ark of the Covenant. Now, what's really interesting, that one of the most important artifacts they found was this very, very tiny cylinder seal. So it's like the round little glass or stone seal. I don't know what material that was made of, but you can roll it out and you can see the whole thing laid out. Almost like a microscope. You have to look at it. But one of my friend's wives, yeah, well, he didn't have multiple wives, but one of my friends, his wife was working the sifting part. We had like 50 people, so everyone had a certain section they volunteered on, and this lady spotted this little, I think it was a glass cylinder seal. She spotted it, and it became one of the most important things found because it was actually from Haran. but from not from the time of Abraham, but from the time when the moon god was very whatever reason the moon god was associated with Haran. They had a big temple there, and so Nabonidus, the king of Babylon, helped. Whether he would come there and worship or whatever, because he was a big supporter of the moon god. Same with Tama down in Saudi Arabia. He would go down there, just south east of Mount Sinai. It was a big oasis called Tama, and it has the moon god place. And so when the handwriting the wall story happens in the book of Daniel, and they bring in Daniel because Belshazzar is scared to death. And he sees this invisible handwriting these words on the wall. The reason why he gives Daniel the third highest position and not the second, because he himself was not the first. He was still the second, the crown prince. So he gives Daniel the third
His
highest
father
position.
went off to party somewhere.
His father was in Saudi Arabia, modern day
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, at Tama because of this moon god sin. And so on this excavation we were on in 2006, I think that's when they found it. They found this little cylinder seal from Haran, of all places, down there in the rubble of the old city of Jerusalem. And they published just last year, the year before, they finally published like a decade later. Uh, they're so slow on this stuff, but I know they're busy. But they published an article about that little cylinder seal, and you can see actually photographs of it. The IA published it. I don't know what journal, but those interested, I can find the link. I downloaded it and read it, but it mentions the Wyatt Dig and all that, the group that were in that area, the digging. So so on the tours we see Haran. We see now we mentioned Abraham. So Abraham stops there, but there's different ideas of where he was born. Now, I do believe in a northern Mesopotamia idea because I think he was heading south, and Haran is on the direct route from, if Ur is north of Haran today, he's heading south to the Promised Land. Then he would, within a day's journey, he would stop at Haran.
That would be Syria?
No. So north of Haran, so we're still in Turkey. No, north of Haran would be Urfa. So some believe Urfa is Ur, that Abraham was born. And that's where we take people to the birth cave of Abraham. It's a traditional site, but it's in the downtown ancient area of Urfa. And it's
that's also in
a
Turkey?
mosque. Yeah, so Urfa, Haran, these are all, Book of Genesis. That's why I call it the Patriarch Tour. Now, there are some also who believe that Job from the land of Uz was from this area. I lean towards maybe Edom or closer to Saudi Arabia, like Midian, based on some of his friends, unless they travel long distances. Some of his friends' names were Edomite names. So it suggests that, Job was down south near like southern Jordan or whatever. But if maybe they travel way up north, there is a local tradition, though, that even Job was in the Urfa area. So whether that's true or not, we don't know. I mean, at any rate, on our tour, we show people the site. They can see some of the sites that people associate with these stories. So it's definitely a packed full tour for 12 days.
Okay. I'm almost done with you. I know you're tired. I just got two more questions
Yeah,
for
no,
you.
no. It's been a crazy day. I told my family this, but I got robbed in Istanbul
Oh
early
my
this
God.
morning. Yeah, I was attacked in basically this person put it was a glass shard right like real well what side this side
Wow.
I don't know if you can see it, and thankfully it didn't cut, but it was quite an ordeal because I was by myself, and yeah, I've just been dealing with thinking about all this all day, and I had to travel, so I didn't want to cancel this though. So he got a bunch of money from me, but at any rate, at least I'm alive, thankfully. But he had that one side, the glass right up to my head, and he was just pushing it in, and the other side, he was like hitting me in the head, or slapping me around, basically saying, "Give me your money, give me your money." It was just, and I was like stunned. So
Wow.
I dealt with a robbery, and so right now
Wow.
I'm kind of my brain is still. Yeah. Anyways,
That's a question I had cut out. I was going to ask you, what are some places more dangerous out there than others?
no, I don't want people to say, "Oh, I'm not going on this tour now." No. So here's the thing: just like if I say, "Hey, let's go visit Hollywood," I wouldn't. But if we did, there's
Yeah.
parts of LA I definitely would not go to,
Yeah.
or Chicago too. So Istanbul,
Yeah.
there's certain
It's in
neighborhoods
San
that have
Pedro. You don't
people.
want to go down there.
Yeah, I mean, it's any large city we have people gathered. You're gonna have wicked people, like a lot more concentration of wicked people. So yeah, the guy he got his money, and I hope he enjoys it. But that was my ordeal today. And no, our tours, we're with local guides. I'm a guide. The places we're going to are touristy sites. We're not going in the middle of the night, some down some alley.
Right.
Istanbul is safe. This is my first time anywhere in the Middle East having. I was robbed in Cairo. I went to the ATM machine, and these kids surrounded me. I got separated from my group, and it was my stupid mistake. In the middle of the daytime, this one, and they tried to sell me some cheap stuff. I said, okay, I'll buy it just to get them off my back. So I pulled out my wallet. I should not have done that. I should always have cash like outside your wallet. Anyway, I pulled out my wallet, opened it up, and I had just taken out $3,000. Not 3,000. You can't do that. $300 worth of Egyptian pounds. And so my wallet's, Egyptian pound was like right now it's 50 to a dollar, I think. But anyways, who knows what it was back? This is like 4 or 5 years ago. This happened, and they saw it, these kids, and they just took all the money. And one guy just reached in as I'm opening up my wallet to get like to pay for whatever it was, like for like $1 or $2. They pulled everything out and they ran. And so what am I going to do? It's a crowded area. I'm not going to try to go after them. So I learned my lesson there. But that was like that was Cairo. But so this was that wasn't violent. This one, I actually thought I was going to die. There's times when the guy was like this yelling at me, "Shut up!" I was trying to calm him down. He's like, "Don't talk," and then he was like really pressing this. It was not a knife, but it was a glass piece. He was holding it, and I cut myself because at first when he did it, I was like, "What? Who's this?" I was just totally shocked. So I tried to pull the thing out of his hand, and I realized I don't know what it was. He was pointing at me. I just knew it was a pointy object, and it was a glass, broken glass from a bottle or something. It just sliced my hand. Then I'm bleeding. I'm telling the guy, "What are you doing?" Then I realized, oh, he wants to rob me. And so I stopped trying to resist and trying to then calm him down. I was just saying all these, private or silent prayers, and made it through that. And I was like, okay, time to go back to my apartment in Eastern Turkey, nowhere Istanbul. So I left. I didn't report it to the police because he threatened. He basically said he took down my personal information. He said, okay, if you tell anyone about this, I have people around Turkey who can find you. And I was like, okay, you get your money, enjoy
Wow.
your life, leave me alone. So
Wow.
yeah.
You're a soldier, man. You're at least you go through a lot for what you do.
Yeah, I always I joked with some locals about. I said, "Why didn't Noah's Ark land in Hawaii or some tropical
Yeah.
paradise? Why did it land out in the mountains of Hawaii? The Ark landed. And then we could all be in Hawaii, looking in our shorts and just looking for the Ark
Uh, Having all
on the
kinds of
beach.
tourists just coming in.
Yeah, no, we're in the remote area. Out here is safe. This happened in Istanbul, again, a big city. But no, I've never had any issues where I felt threatened in Saudi with the Bedouins or out here with the Kurds around Noah's Ark. They're so hospitable. Everyone loves our interaction. We always try to get with our groups to meet the locals and eat with them, talk to them. We have obviously a translator. So yeah, no, we're fine out here. It's just a couple times you run into people like that the larger cities. So
Yeah, well, I guess everything has changed because of the tourism. Because apparently Ron got robbed the first time he went to Turkey, but now it's a whole different
yeah,
area, right? So
when he yeah no he was the real pioneer and trooper. He was in prison for 70 some days in Saudi and then in Jordan, and then he was kidnapped for 21 days in Turkey by terrorists. Him and his team. I remember watching. I have it on my YouTube channel. Within the old videos, you can watch him tell that story from 1990 or 91 when he got they escaped with their lives. Plus he was robbed or they escaped with their lives on that first trip with his sons at the hotel. And then even the village of the eight, where the anchor stones or drogue stones are, he's always said that the guy at the time, who's the village elder, had threatened to kill him. So he always show up with other people, so he's not by himself. And now it's totally different. This is back in the late '70s, and kind of the Wild West out here. When I went here in '97, he gave us a lot of tips. Bill Fry and I, who's the guy who came out here and asked me to come with him as a travel companion. I was in the middle of college in '97, and I remember at first Bill did not want to tell Ron that we're going because Bill was on Ron's 1990 or '91 tour, and the tour bus, they had like 50 Americans driving in, and at one of these checkpoints they have out here, they got stopped, and the gendarme, which is like the sheriff out here, these soldiers said you can't go. It's a big, you're a big target. And so they turned them around. So Ron then went with some like 4 friends or 3 friends in a taxi, and they drove out to Noah's Ark to check on the site. And this was the early '90s. And so Bill was not part of it. Like he was stuck on the bus with all the other tourists, and so he was upset that he didn't get invited. So he said, "Ron," he said, "Andrew, we're just going to go out there because Ron's going to try to change our mind and say it's not safe to go to Noah's Ark." And I'm thinking, "Oh, well, is it really safe to go?" This is '97, and so finally, I tell Ron, I said, "Hey, Ron," I spill the beans. I call him up and I tell him, "We're going to Noah's Ark." I remember his exact words. He said, "You tell Bill to call me right now." So like, oh no, Bill's be mad at me. I called Bill. He said, "Ron wants to talk to you about this trip we're going to go on." And he's like, "Andrew, why did you tell us?" I thought it'd be best to tell him. It turned out for the best because Ron gave us money to give to the Hassan, who's the guy running the visitor center. Like we have Nuri now. Plus, Ron gave us these posters because the visitor center, until not recently, until we put all this new work in, it was just an empty building after they built it in '87. So 10 years later, I'm there and it's just an empty building, nothing, like one table inside. So Ron gave us these little posters we stuck on the wall so the visitors can understand like the evidence for Noah's Ark. So it was good that we told them, but he gave us all these tips, but made us kind of paranoid. I remember one tip was because he learned this because of the robbery attempt when he was in the hotel on his first trip. He basically, because they knew that Ron was leaving, he told them, "Okay, I'm leaving on a Wednesday, for example." So Tuesday night, and he tried to rob him because now they know the money source is leaving. Well, so he said, when you go there, Andrew and Bill, you guys just tell them like whatever day you're leaving, tell them you're leaving like 5 days later or whatever in the future. So if our trip is actually like Monday morning, we're gonna leave. Tell them Wednesday morning we're leaving. And then when you actually leave, you say, "Oh, we changed our mind," so they can't have time to plan your demise. So we did that. I remember I got sick that Sunday night. Yeah, I think it was a Sunday night. But anyways, the day before we leave, I remember I got sick, and we left. The morning we left, the hotel was like surprised. And even our guide at the time, he was like, "Oh, you guys said you're staying 2 more days." I was like, "No, we decided to leave." But
They were all in on it.
so yeah, yeah. Me and Bill, we knew exactly what to do. Thanks to Ron, but you don't have to deal with that anymore. There's because of Mount Ararat's open for climbers, like trekking, sporting events. You have all these tourists coming, and it's a great thing because these tour companies bring in climbers to climb the highest mountain in Turkey, which is Ararat. For the final day after their climb, they take them to Noah's Ark. And so, no, normally in the past, you just have like the Ron Wyatt people, those who really into this topic come out there. So, very small number, but because it's outside of town towards the Iranian border, so it's kind of off the beaten track. But now that these tour companies from West Turkey and then local tour companies are adding it on to make it a complete tour for their climbing tours, they now go to Ishak Pasha Palace, the Ottoman Palace, and they go to Noah's Ark. And so we're getting people from around the world who are witnessing the true location after they climb the fake, up the fake mountain.
So can you climb the real Noah's Ark? How close can you actually get to the Jerusalem?
Not usually. You're not allowed to. Nuri, he makes a personal decision. You have to go through his land, but according to the government, people they're allowed to walk around it, but not on it. But people do. He does let because he said he got permission for myself, and then when I bring out there as part of the research or our tours. So he says he has a permit for me to get on it, but I do see other groups sometimes go out there. But most of the time, they don't have time to, anyways. They watch our 5-minute film, then they see the posters, and they take pictures outside of the site, and so within half an hour, they're gone. So they get back on the bus. So that's what our tour. We have the complete lectures. We get onto the site. We go around the site. We go above it with the tractor to near the Iranian border and talk about the original landing and different theories on that. We go out to the nearby fossil site. No, you get your 2-3 days for this area, and then for the 5-day tour, we throw in the TV shut down. We throw in the Urartu ruins because Van, which is about 3 hours south, 2.5 hours south from here, is the capital of Urartu. So we see the capital, we see the big museum there, the Christian history too, the Church of Bartholomew, Akhtamar Island with Armenian church. So
because Armenia is the oldest Christian countries, right?
Yeah, it was the first Christian country, even before Constantine, like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years. Armenian, the king converted his country to Christianity before Constantine did for Rome. So yeah, a lot of history. In fact, soon this would be a good incentive for the future too. For those interested in coming out here, We don't know the exact time, but they're still working on it to open the borders because right now it's a closed border between Turkey and Armenia. So the only way to get into Armenia, you got to fly, or you have to go through the country of Georgia, just north, which is quite a roundabout route. So if they do open that border, that's on the north side of the mountains, so about an hour and a half from where I'm at. Then we can throw in, I mean, we can add on optional like pre-tours. You can see the Armenian history, where they actually trace their lineage back to one of the grandsons of Noah, I believe, to Japheth or something. So there's a lot of interesting sites in Armenia. I've been there once, and so it'd be nice to tie that into a Noah's Ark tour. So, and hopefully in the future. But yeah,
So what I know this is a little bit off, and I'm not sure if you follow along with it, but uh is there any news about the Ark, about the Ark of the
Ark
Covenant?
of the Covenant.
Mhm.
Oh, the other Ark.
Yeah.
um, no, nothing. I was involved early on. I was the head of the video photography teams from 2003 2006 on that dig, and they were trying to find the original entrance in Zedekiah's cave, the tunnel that Ron said would miraculously open for him by God, and then we also documented his tunnels and the place where he believed the crosshole was in the Garden Tomb. So those were amazing trips, being there, working in those special places, legally working with the Israeli Antiquity Authority, with their archaeologists, and spending a month and a half, sometimes every summer. So those are great memories. But there's nothing new since I think the last work in that area was in 2007. That where they had a big group out there for the Zedekiah's part for that cave. But nothing happening there. I hear people, talk. People make videos about what Ron said and analyze every word he said and try to recreate from his documents. From the blurry photograph. It's great, but there's nothing new though in regards to people working on the site. The Garden Tomb was very anti-Ron Wyatt. So they built over the dig site, which was a
Yeah,
big pit.
I heard they covered up
They
the cross holes too and
yeah they
everything.
yeah, they poured, the 2007. Actually, the last time people worked out there was 2011 in Zedekiah's cave. But anyways, in 2007, a small group went back after the big pit excavation that I was on, 2006, and the smaller team went back and they basically had a half a day to do whatever they wanted to do down there and look at stuff, photograph, and uncover the last bit before they filled it in with gravel. So yeah, they filled it in with pea-sized gravel up to almost the top of that pit. They built a platform over it. They have chairs and they had an awning. So it's like a building they put over it where people can have the communion service and worship services. And then just recently they put a second story on top of that. So I saw in January I was there. I was there a couple times this year, and I need to put out. I have a video. I just haven't edited it yet, but I recorded a video showing like all that they've done so far. But yeah, it's whether it's on purpose or not, it is covered now. So it's I don't know, you would have to break through all that, if they ever give future permission to go excavate there. So I really don't think they will. Ron always believed that the way in will be the original way that God would open, and that would happen by a miracle, like it happened for him, like the tunnel would just show up. And he believed that God would pick the individuals to do it, so there's nothing else to do. He believed there'd be a future time when the mark of the beast law was enforced, that get people interested in the Ten Commandments, that would be the right time for this information to come out. For sure, we know from archaeology and history, and of course the Bible, that the ark disappeared, and that is most likely right before the Babylonian siege or during the siege, which means the ark. And I really believe that God wanted it preserved because He would have then, if He wanted the Babylonians to take it, the ark would have been taken. Look at the Philistines. He let the Philistines take it, even though they couldn't touch it. There was knocking down their gods and all that. But the Babylonians, they when they list in the book of Ezra, I think, and maybe even Nehemiah, they list everything that was actually taken to Babylon. And this is small things like spoons and forks and whatever. Like dishes. Nothing. None of the main furniture that Moses built at Mount Sinai. So like the table of showbread, all that stuff disappears. So then you start having like the book of Maccabees and other apocryphal books after the return of people saying, well, this is what really happened. One mentions an angel opened up and the earth swallowed it. I forget which Jewish book that was in, but you have these type of quotes like almost like a supernatural event hiding the ark. and then you have Maccabees saying it was Jeremiah and his men hiding on Mount
Yeah.
Nebo. So
That supposedly
yeah,
there
you
was some
have
kind of a lever system put into the whole
yeah,
temple that
that's what Michael Rood
yeah,
from Rood
Michael Rood.
Awakening. You know,
Yeah.
he believes
I'm
that
not
he
sure how
has
he found that
changed.
information, but it seemed very right on or very
Possible.
spot on.
Yeah, he was looking at
Yeah.
the measurements, I believe, of the pillars or something, and said something
Yeah.
was off, and will suggest it was,
And
you know,
that's why he married the Pharaoh's daughter, because it was a family
ah,
secret in order to get all that lever system.
oh, from
So
the
yeah.
pyramids.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
very possible. I mean, there's
okay.
things we probably won't know until we get to heaven. The things that are outside the Bible, but I do believe before heaven that we'll get to see the Ark of the Covenant and the Ten Commandments. I believe it's all part of end time events. Like people looking at the red heifer and things like that. I think the Ark of the Covenant, which is I believe way more important than those other items, that it would come out and we'll learn about it and see it. So that would be very exciting. That it'll be the biggest discovery beyond like yeah, I think beyond Noah's Ark, even especially if the blood of the Messiah is on the mercy seat, like Ron claimed. You have the original books that Moses wrote on the backside. You have the Ten Commandments written by God's own finger inside the. So it's a very holy object, and so God has His plans. I don't think any man can try to go uncover it or find it. I think whether it's Ron White who found it or someone else in the future that will find it, it's all in God's timing, I think, for the Ark of the Covenant.
So let me ask you one last question. What can you tell us about Saqqara, which is probably Joseph's granary or something like that? And is that being excavated today, or are there tours to there, or what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, they're always excavating Saqqara, so it's known and the main reason because there's so many tombs. It's a what do they call the site where they bury the dead? Necropolis, yeah. And
Oh,
so it was
necropolis.
a sacred site for them to bury, especially on that, it's the west bank of the Nile. So the Valley of the Kings is on the west bank. So a lot of the ancient Egyptians would be buried on that side of the river, like the setting sun direction. And but you have not always you have these tombs not only from the Old Kingdom, the time you say of Joseph, but all the way up through the New Kingdom, and to I think even Greek and Roman period of people wanting to be buried in that area. So there's a lot of archaeology there, a lot of sand covering everything up. So they're doing a lot of work. And in fact, when I was there last, we do tours there, our Exodus tours. So I took a group there, and actually, I was doing a private film tour with a Brazilian YouTuber, and his videographer and I were there with him in May. And there are you can see that actually there was a team excavating just the northeast of the pyramid, Set Pyramid. So Ron really believed that Joseph was Imhotep, who was the vizier that built the first pyramid in the world, the stone structure. Before that, the burials were kind of like a mastaba tomb with like one flat level with a pit below it. Here you have the step pyramid with a pit right in the middle, and then these steps above it. So it was a different design, a brand new design. Now we got permission back in 2020. Let's see, 21 maybe or 22. We had a Mennonite group that had a very specific thing they wanted to do, like different sites. So three of the sites they wanted to visit were not public, like you couldn't go there, and so we had to pay special $3,000 fee per site to get our group in. So we had planned it all out. We had to get the permission ahead of time. But one of them was to go below the step pyramid, which is closed to the public. And so I've heard of you read articles about it and you see National Geographic films, but I've never been down there. So it was great that this group, we had 20 people, and so we could divide up the cost with the 3,000 just for the one site. We got down in there, and it's just a maze of tunnels, and a lot of them still have artifacts there, vases, ropes, the blue tile, which is really beautiful, glazed tile down there. Statues of Dozier. I don't know if it was the pharaoh at the time. I don't know if there's anything with Imhotep down there, but if you read Wikipedia entry for this site, it mentioned that there's a lot that they discovered thousands of stone, I think pottery or stoneware that was full of grain, two or three different types of grain. So someone wonders, is that to preserve it down there, or was that like an offering after the dead? Of course, the traditional view is the offering. Or is it like a memorial? Like, okay, because the 7-year famine and the grain bins. So that's one of the key sites is the pyramid there. But then right south of there, they call it the Southern Tombs. And these are pit burials, pits just 30, 40 feet down, straight down. They carved out of the limestone there, the bedrock, and that's where they buried the dead. They have a covering on it. Ron believed that these were grain bins. Um, I don't know if they had fully excavated, especially the sites you see in his old videos and newsletters, the pictures of what they call the Southern Tombs. And for an extra ticket, you can get access. You can go all the way down now. In the past, you could not do that. Maybe 4 years ago, they opened it. And so when you get to the very bottom, when they excavated the whole thing out, there is a mastaba tomb. So whether they reuse, this burial, the grain bin, which is perfectly a pit now, so they thought, okay, we can use it as a tomb, or I don't know, but there is definitely a tomb at the bottom of these grain bins for that area. But there's a series of these pits around, and so we show people them. So yeah, I don't know of any more research being done, like from the Ron White perspective for the grain bins, but we show you the site, we get you down into the pits, and you can see them. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. I'm sorry I took up so much of your time, but everything you talk
No
about is so
problem.
fascinating. Yeah. So if you could
It's
please
always
do us a
more.
big favor.
No,
And if you could- yeah, I know I have a bunch of questions I didn't even get to ask. But
next
yeah,
time.
if you could please do us a favor.
Yeah.
Yeah, next time. If you could do us a favor and please pray us out.
Oh yeah, for sure. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for giving this opportunity where we can actually talk about the Bible events and the different scientific and archaeological discoveries that support what you wrote in your Word and what it means to us today. Um, bless Sergio's ministry and what he's trying to do with his podcast. Bless our work out here in Noah's Ark, and bless those who are listening to this that whether they can come out here or not, they can understand the truth of the Bible and the story of Noah and the flood and how we're living in these end times, as in the days of Noah. Just ask that this information can get out there and that people who are searching for truth can find it. Thank you again for even keeping me safe today from the wicked elements out there in society. We're living in the end times. I just thank you that you have your angels around us. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen and amen. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Grotto on the Tar Pit. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Andrew.
Will